people today. They could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have a wise friend and fierce defender in your corner. A friend like AARP. So your health lives longer.
This is just slow-mo karate?
Just slow-mo karate.
Your money lives longer.
I just bought that.
I just sold that.
And your happiness lives longer. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Join today.
Welcome to AARP Illinois' virtual event. It's so wonderful to have you with us. AARP is on a mission to connect with individuals across various communities, especially those aged 50 and above. We're here to listen, understand, and address the unique needs of you and your community as we age. Our goal is to enrich your experience by expanding our local activities, providing opportunities for you to discover and engage with all that life has to offer right here in your own community and virtually. As we journey through today's event, we invite you to consider joining our dedicated team of AARP volunteers. It's a chance to make a meaningful impact and help us better serve those 50 plus across the nation. Connect with us and be a part of this vibrant movement toward positive change. Welcome, and let's make this event both fun and transformative.
Good afternoon, and welcome to AARP Illinois and the third in our three-part series of virtual events around this year's Bike the Drive event. Bike the Drive has come and gone at the beginning of last month, Labor Day weekend. We hope a lot of you are able to join us there, and we're happy to once again welcome our partners at the Active Transportation Alliance, who put on the year's biggest bicycle-themed party every year on Labor Day weekend to finish out this conversation with us. Today, we're going to be expanding on the conversation we started last time around advocacy around bicycle safety and infrastructure. And our friend Jim Merrill from the Active Transportation Alliance is going to lead us through that conversation. I'm going to turn it over here to Jim in just a second, but I just want to say briefly, if you have questions for us, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we will come to those at the end of Jim's presentation. So again, if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in chat for those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of the program. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Merrill to talk about more about bicycle advocacy on the regional, state, and federal level. Thanks, Jim.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam, and our partners at AARP for working with us on this Bike to Drive webinar series. Really excited to be back here talking with all of you. Today we're going to focus on our regional, state, and federal governments and the role that they play in shaping bicycle infrastructure in our communities. But before we dive in, I just want to say a little bit about Active Transportation Alliance and who we are. So our mission at the Active Transportation Alliance is to advocate for walking, biking, and public transportation to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. So we are a regional advocacy organization, and we work to connect our members and supporters to opportunities to help advance policies, plans, and infrastructure projects that make it easier to walk, bike, or use transit to get around our region. And our vision is really kind of threefold. We envision a world-class transit network and system that connects people with jobs, services, and businesses. Riding a bicycle should be safe and easy, no matter your age or ability or where you live. We want walkable communities where people can get active as they get around. So today we're going to be talking about bicycling, but a lot of the stuff that we're discussing and a lot of the policies and funding also help support walkable and transit-rich communities. We are a membership-based organization, not unlike AARP. So we have over 20,000 members and supporters throughout the region. They support our work in a myriad of ways, and you can find out more about all this stuff at activetrans.org. We have our annual member party coming up December 3rd. Bike to Drive just happened. I just realized I didn't change that line. Bike to Drive is our largest annual event and fundraiser. If you're not familiar, it is where we open up Lakeshore Drive to 20,000 people on bikes in a car-free Lakeshore Drive. So it's a really fun event every year at Labor Day. It also helps us raise money to do the work that I'm about to talk more about. Chicago Bike Month is another big kind of moment in our calendar related to biking. That's National Bike Month. Chicago Bike Month is in May of every year. So next spring, you can look forward to joining us with that, including the Bike to Work Challenge, where we allow people to kind of track their bike trips and compete against peers and other organizations. And we also host an annual gala called the Movers and Shakers Ball, which is in the spring, which we'd love to see folks out at. So getting into the main topic of today's presentation, if folks have participated in the first two webinars, the first one was focused really on kind of individual safety and what you need as an individual to be ready to get on your bike. And we had Edwin from the Chicago Safe Ambassadors walk folks through some of that. And then at our second webinar, we talked about kind of the community level and what does your town or city need to have in place in order to make it easier for folks to bike around town. So we talked about the importance of things like having a local bike plan, having dedicated funding, having an advisory council that can help hold your elected officials accountable for all those things, and some of the different policies and funding that we've seen lead to success for communities around the region. So today we're going to focus on also kind of another part of that story, but I wanted to show this slide first just to kind of help remind folks that what we're talking about here in terms of creating safe communities for biking, it's all about this level of comfort. So ultimately, we want to make it safe and comfortable for people to use bikes for everyday trips. And so that means providing the infrastructure and the spaces and bike lanes and trails that people are willing to use on a day-to-day basis. So here you can see kind of the spectrum of different types of bike infrastructure, from the more stressful on the left to the more comfortable on the right. And so a lot of the policies and funding and plans that we talk about across all levels of government, it's all about how can we make it easier for communities to get these types of low stress bikeways you see on the right built in connected networks in their communities. So I really wanted to kind of center our conversation around this idea of low stress bike networks and on-street bike lanes, protected bike lanes, off-street paths. What are the policies and plans and different tools that we have to make sure we can actually get these projects in the ground? So we talked about last time, right, the local government and the really important role that local government plays in all kinds of transportation decision. And as an advocate for better biking in your community, you should really start by checking out what's going on locally. And if you watch the webinar or go back and watch the webinar or reach out to us, we can help you connect and identify kind of what the needs are in your local community. But there are also many other levels of government. So our regional government, both our kind of county level governments, but also some regional bodies that we have here in Northeastern Illinois play a really important role in a lot of the things that we care about, as do the state and federal government. So I'm going to kind of go through those three levels of government kind of one by one and talk folks through how to, what's the role that those levels of government play in helping, helping local communities and municipalities and towns and villages and cities be successful in making their community more bike friendly. So kind of working our way up from the local level, the kind of next level up of government is the regional government, and really talking about kind of two types of government here in Illinois. The first is the county government, so Cook County, DuPage County, Lake, Will, Kendall, Kane, McHenry. All of our kind of county level governments play an important role when it comes to promoting biking in a couple of ways. Often counties have their own set of funding resources and planning staff. So here, where I'm sitting in Cook County, We have a program called Invest in Cook, which is a pretty neat program where the county is using some of its motor fuel tax fund to help support communities here in Cook County do some of the planning and work that it takes to get better biking lanes in their communities. So that's a really important source of funding. Counties also are occasionally the owners of roadways, so our roads don't always belong to just one unit of government. We have locally owned roads, state-owned roads. They're also county-owned roads, and so understanding the role that your county plays on a particular road, they may be the ones that you need to be advocating for if you're looking to get more bike-friendly facilities or infrastructure on that road. But I think maybe the biggest and most familiar way when we think about biking in our region that the county really intersects with our work is through the forest preserves. And so throughout our region, we have county level forest preserves that often build and maintain extensive off-street trail networks. So again, thinking about that slide that we saw about the level of comfort and the level of stress, those off-street trail networks are often kind of the ultimate kind of comfort and low stress experience that we're looking for. So working with those forest preserves at the county level is a really important part of building out a connected network that makes people feel safe and comfortable using their bikes as everyday transportation. The next kind of regional government entity that I wanted to mention is probably a little bit less visible unless you're a person who pays attention to a lot of planning and policy making in our region. So every region in the country has something called the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and this is something that's required by federal law. So one of the things that the federal government does is set some expectations in terms of, if you want our federal transportation dollars, we need to see you have this certain kind of agency structure in place, or we won't cut you the big checks that we have to give you. So this Metropolitan Planning Organization, wherever you live, there is one that is that you're a part of, or a regional transportation commission is another kind of similar entity. But here in Northeastern Illinois, we have the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or CMAP for short, and you can see a picture of their website, which is full of all kinds of really great information if you're interested in kind of learning more. In particular, a lot of great data resources from CMAP. You can see there's a lovely photo of people walking and biking. So they play a few different roles in our region. Probably one of the most important is they are responsible for allocating a few different pots of funding that come from the federal government. So that money comes down from the federal government, and communities can apply to CMAP, but CMAP is ultimately responsible for deciding, making those funding determinations and who's going to get a grant on some of our key transportation dollars. They also kind of maintain the plan for the region, and so this is important because a lot of our federal grant dollars require that a project be included in a larger regional plan to make sure that there is at least some method to the madness when it comes to development in our region, and how we're going about investing in transportation infrastructure. So so CMAP is the keeper of our regional plan, and that's something that gets renewed every 10 years and really kind of helps provide some shape and structure to how communities are going after some of these different pots of funding, particularly for some of the really major projects like highway construction. And finally, CMAP plays a really important role in providing technical assistance and building the capacity of particularly people at the local level in municipal offices or municipal staff. So they will often directly work with communities and provide kind of extra planning expertise and extra hands to help them develop neighborhood level plans or plans for different corridors on roadways and things like that. So they will also get involved kind of hands-on with working directly with folks, and also doing training and building the capacity of those local level staff, which again, going back to that nested image that we had. It's really up to the local staff and local elected officials to be putting together these kinds of projects that ultimately will lead to a bike lane on the road. So an important kind of interim level of government, kind of continuing to move up the chain here to state government. Again, while the state might not often play a direct role on your local roads, they do play a huge role in shaping kind of policy and funding and planning for the states. So our state Department of Transportation, the Illinois Department of Transportation, or IDOT, they own and maintain a lot of the large arterials and highways in our region. And so some of the most, the highest volume, quickest moving, most dangerous roadways are actually owned and controlled by IDOT. So when we want to see safety improvements to those roadways, we have to work through the State Department of Transportation, which can at times be challenging. As you can see, I have another photo here on the right of IDOT's website, and the CMAP photo was one of people walking, biking, driving, enjoying a local road. This is a picture on the IDOT website of a highway interchange. Looks like in the middle of a rural community. So you can kind of tell just by the kind of image that they put forward that not every transportation agency is as focused on bicycling or active modes. And so this is one of the important roles of advocates, is to make sure that we're identifying those gaps and maybe the commitment to our shared vision for better walking and biking in these different agencies, and giving IDOT some of the tough love and push that they might need to do a better job of thinking about everyone who's using the roadway, not just people in cars. So IDOT, again, a really key player. A lot of our busy arterial roadways and most dangerous roads they actually own, and so they were the ones who will decide what can go on there. They also are responsible for administering a lot of our federal the money that comes to Illinois from the federal government for transportation, and potential there is to the state departments of transportation actually do have some flexibility in how they choose to spend some of those dollars. So we would like to see our Illinois Department of Transportation spending some of the money that they're spending right now on maybe rebuilding highways or expanding highways and putting that towards more walking, biking, and transit projects. So that's an example of a type of advocacy that can happen with our State Department of Transportation. And then, of course, we have our state legislature, the Illinois General Assembly. They play an important role in setting traffic safety laws and the vehicle code. So an example of the kind of direct impact that can have on making it easier to bike, and this is getting a little into the weeds, a little bit of kind of policy wonkery, but just recently, last year we worked with members of the General Assembly to basically, there was a on the books in Illinois law, a requirement that any state-owned roadway, so again, we were just mentioning that the Illinois Department of Transportation owns many of our roads. So on any state-owned roadway, we need to build the intersections in such a way that they can accommodate the turning movements of the biggest 65-foot trucks that are on our roads. And what that means in practice is it means that we can't put the kind of pedestrian and bicycle safety infrastructure that we know actually makes people safer. So things like extending the curb to shorten crossing distances, adding refuge islands in the middle of streets, or protected bike lanes. Because we had to have this really large radius so these trucks can make their turning movement, it basically requires us to make intersections that are unsafe for people on foot or on bike. And so this is actually something in state law. So the Illinois General Assembly had to work with advocates like us and with residents like all of you folks on actually changing that law. And we're pleased to see that get passed a couple of years ago. But an example of the kind of advocacy in the General Assembly that we do on a seemingly small, maybe a kind of seemingly minor policy area, but actually has a big impact in terms of how we build our roadways. And then, of course, the General Assembly also allocates state resources. And so in addition to, I've mentioned a lot of the federal dollars that come through our state, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But we also have state level funding that comes from our own state taxes and fees from state coffers that we spend on walking and biking projects. And there's another good example of bicycle advocacy on the state level from the last few years is a program called the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, or ITEP. And this was basically the program through which a small pot of federal dollars was distributed to local communities that were interested in building, walking or biking infrastructure and other types of similar transportation enhancements. Back in 2019, the state decided to, through a lot of advocacy from us and others, to actually grow this program by investing our own state dollars to the tune of $50 million each year into the ITEP program. So we went from typically seeing about $20 or $40 million in a grant cycle, which happens every other year, to seeing now, just this year, we're going to see, I think it's $130 or $140 million in money flowing to local communities to build better places for walking and biking. So this is a really exciting development. We really went from one of the worst states in terms of state level funding to one of the top in the country overnight, just by passing this law. So we were really pleased to see this, but a really important example of how advocacy on the state level has led to a really huge transformation in the amount of resources that are available for our local communities. And something that we're really proud of about that program too is that it sets aside 25% of the program's budget to go to the highest need communities. And so making sure that these dollars are actually flowing to the places that need them most, and might not oftentimes with grant programs like this, not surprisingly, like other things, it's the communities that have the staff capacity to be able to apply for grants that are able to access these. So through having this dedicated kind of equity measure to ensure those resources are being targeted to the highest need communities, we're seeing a more equitable distribution of those dollars, which is really exciting. Finally, I'm going to talk about the federal government, the feds, and keeping with my theme of screenshots of the DOT websites, here is the U.S. Department of Transportation with a picture of an airplane. So you can tell maybe what's on their mind is a little bit different than the state and regional level agencies. But the United States Department of Transportation, obviously an important source of funding for roadways and for transit construction, so building things, capital projects in particular. But we have seen, in the last 10 or 15 years, a growing portfolio of programs on the federal level that specifically support walking and biking projects. So that is an exciting change that we've seen. More money being directly kind of dedicated to trails, protected bike lanes, that kind of thing. And probably maybe a less visible role, but one that's really important, especially as we've seen a rise in serious injuries and fatalities on our roadways, is the kind of consumer protection aspects of the U.S. Department of Transportation's mission. So they have a really important role in regulating vehicle design. So those kind of 5-star safety crash ratings that you hear about in car commercials. Currently, that whole kind of safety paradigm is based solely on the safety for the occupants of a vehicle. And so that means we aren't evaluating the impact that vehicle design has on the safety of people outside of the car, so someone walking. And what this has led to in practice is a lot of supersized trucks and SUVs that have really big front ends, which are far more dangerous when impacting someone in a crash. And we've seen that really be one of the drivers of the increase in serious crashes and fatalities. And that is the kind of regulation that only the federal government has the authority to implement and enact. So we're excited to see, some of our friends on the federal level have been pushing on this for a long time. And we're seeing the federal government beginning for the first time to develop some guidelines on pedestrian safety, evaluating car design from a pedestrian safety perspective, which could be really transformative for traffic safety. And then, of course, Congress sets funding levels and creates programs. One program that we're really excited about is the Active Transportation Improvement Investment Program. So this is actually dedicated funding for things like trails and protected bike lanes. We're looking for that to be the level of investment to be grown in that program. There's also a big push for the federal government to fund transit operations, so the actual staffing that goes into running the trains and not just building train lines or bus stops, the capital expenses. So this is something where there hasn't been federal support for, and if you live here locally in Chicago or the suburbs, we've noticed a serious decline in the quality of transit service, and that's large part due to the lack of available funding for operations. So having, the federal government chip in a bit more on that would really go a long way towards easing our transit woes. Illinois is and always has been kind of a big player in transportation policy on the federal level, given kind of our role in the transportation network and really being a hub for cargo and other things. So currently we have a couple of heavy hitters in the House of Representatives. So Representative Mike Quigley is on the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee, which he's the ranking member of right now. And that means should the Democrats retake the House in November, he would be the chair of that subcommittee, which essentially sets the funding levels for all of these programs in the Department of Transportation that I was just talking about. So a really key position. Even as ranking member, he also has a lot of influence and to shape that. But as a committee chair, he would really be able to, and he's said he's interested in drastically expanding the amount of federal investment in for bike infrastructure, which we would be really excited to see. Of course, we work with whoever is in office. But we also have Representative Chuy Garcia, who's on the Transportation Committee, so a different committee that also shapes the transportation policy on the federal level. He's also a planner by trade, so one of the actual few kind of trained transportation professionals in Congress. So we're lucky to have Rep. Garcia on our Illinois delegation as well. So I'm gonna kind of wrap up now, and if folks have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But hopefully the last couple of webinars, you noticed that none of this gets done without advocacy, and we need to be kind of pushing across all these levels of government constantly to be making our communities safer and better for walking. So please become an advocate for safer streets. You can do that by joining our e-newsletter list at activetrans.org. We have a whole host of advocacy resources specifically dedicated for suburban communities at activetrans.org/BWET, Bike Walk Every Town. We have a new leadership group called Street Team Advocates. You can check that out at activetrans.org/street team. We're doing trainings and socials and other stuff. And then we have every other month, or we alternate between city and suburban advocacy connect calls, which is it's just an opportunity, a lunchtime call for folks to hear about everything that's going on in our campaigns and issues. So all this stuff you can find at activetrans.org. A lot of ways to get involved. Here's my email address, jim@activetrans.org. Feel free to reach out or give me a call. Happy to talk to you more. If people have any questions or anything, happy to answer them.
All right, thank you, Jim. This is Adam. I didn't introduce myself at the top, I don't think. Adam Ballard, Associate State Director with AARP Illinois. I've been our host for these three events. And again, I want to thank Jim and the others from Active Transportation Alliance who've been involved in this series. At this point, we don't have any questions in chat, so you nailed it, Jim. Congratulations. And again, we want to thank all of you for joining us for these events, and hopefully joining us as well at Bike the Drive earlier this month. AARP is also very much a champion of active transportation, walking, biking, and similar options for older adults in safe communities. So learn more about our livable communities work at aarp.org/livable. And you can learn more about the work we're doing in this area there at AARP. And again, I want to thank you for joining us, and that will